I'm cool to talk about whatever.
Yeah, so what's it like to talk to evil people on the phone?
I think that I have become somewhat. Would callous be the right word? I feel like I've been doing it
Depends.
for 3 years.
Huh?
Yeah, I've been doing it for 3 years.
Okay.
So initially, there were times where a scammer would say, um, "I play a grandma character, or I do older characters. I try to be like a grandfather," and they would say something like, if you don't go to the store and buy me a gift card, I will come to your house and shoot you." And the first few times I heard that, you don't know what to say. And there's this moment of, wow, how could another person say this to a human being? And then I think the more that I've done it, I just, maybe I'm desensitized. I don't know.
So
It's like
what would you what so you said that there's a moment where you and then you made a facial expression.
oh,
And so
where you're
what do you
almost
feel
speechless.
in that moment?
I think for me, there's times where when I talk to them, I feel, uh, I'm searching for the right word. You can feel shocked and wonder, how could a human being say that to someone? How could a person get to the point where they feel it's okay to threaten an 87-year-old grandma for a gift card? I guess that's what goes through my mind.
Yeah, so that's a little bit abstract, right? Because like you're on the other
Yeah.
end of the phone and they're telling you this, but I don't hear anything personal. Right? You're asking how could someone do it's like you're watching the news, like you're not participating. How could anyone do this to another human being? Which is a little bit strange. Like I would expect that if I was on the phone with someone and said, "I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to kill you," even if I was pretending, I would imagine that I felt like some kind of personal
Yeah,
reaction.
remorse.
Yeah.
Yeah, some kind of, yeah. And a few of the scammers I've talked to, I think they don't care at all. They're okay with, they want me to be afraid, and they want me
Sure.
to cry and capitulate and listen to whatever it is they want. And I suppose that's the hardest part, is where there are times that I know, in order to keep wasting the scammer's time, in order to keep like doing what I do, I have to play a character who is scared and sad and will take their abuse. And sometimes that's really hard to
What's hard about
like
it?
work through. Um, well, it's terrible. You have someone yelling at an old man, and someone who is like verbally abusing you and trying to uh, manipulate someone to give them money, and you have to act like this is okay. I'm just gonna keep going along with it, and I think I'm fine with it because I know that I'm educating people about the scams. I'm wasting the guy's time. At the end of the day, I typically also, something that we've been doing lately is I'll like buy the Google Play card that they want, and my background is in software dev, so I coded a fake Google store, and I redeem the Google Play card, and then they get really, really mad at me. So I know in the back of my mind that there's
How
gonna
do
be some
how do you feel when they get mad at you?
there. Yeah, admittedly there is a little bit of like a, I don't know if justice is the right word, because it's not really justice, but
What is it?
um,
Kit.
don't ask me that question. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but there's something um satisfying about saying, well, you thought that you could control the situation and manipulate an 87-year-old man, but actually we were controlling the situation for the past 5 hours, and you just got scammed. It's
Mm-hmm.
like we flipped the table and kind of got back at the scammers in a small way, I
Do
guess.
you
But
Can I ask you, so you were saying earlier that you become callous over time. Do you feel a whole lot of empathy?
like in general,
Yeah.
or I think in general, I hate. I don't like making statements like this, but I feel as though I have empathy, and I don't like saying that because I don't like coming. I don't want to come across like, oh yeah, I'm great, or um, I'm a really nice person or something. But I do think that I think about people, and a lot of the times when I talk to scammers, I think in the back of my mind, this is just another person who, is going through who knows what, and I don't know the story that they got him here, but
Yeah. So Kit, let me ask you. So those seem like thoughts, right?
ooh, okay.
Right. So what I'm curious about is, do you when I ask you, do you feel empathy? Your answer was sort of, I think I do, but I don't want to say yes because that seems arrogant or something.
Yeah, I just don't want to I don't want to sound like I'm saying, dude, I'm the nicest person on the internet. I'm the most humble person ever. Because
But
that's obviously
that's
not.
not the question I'm asking, right? I'm not asking if you're a nice guy. Are you concerned that maybe you come across as too nice or not nice enough?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yes, I think that I'm empathetic. I
Okay.
think I will answer it more straightforwardly.
Sure. You think you're empathetic. What makes you think you're empathetic?
I get empathy and sympathy mixed up.
Sure.
So let me
So
Google it.
so let's define them. Great point, right? So sympathy is feeling kind of bad for someone. Empathy is feeling what they feel.
Okay. Yeah, I think that. So say that again. Sympathy is more
Sympathy is feeling
bad.
bad, right? So I'm over here and you're over there, and I feel bad for you. And empathy is sort of, I feel bad with you, right? So empathy is the capacity for one human being to like feel another's pain. So like if I'm watching TV and someone gets hit in the nuts, I feel a visceral pain within myself. Does that make sense?
Putting yourself in someone's shoes.
Yeah, exactly. So
Then
for example, when I see
I would say that I am empathetic or have. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I'm going to toss out kind of an inflammatory hypothesis. And I think that and please give me a chance to explain myself. So as we become callous, I think we sort of lose our capacity for empathy, right? And you kind of like, I'm just noticing that in your job, or for lack of, in your stream, which I'm just going to call a job because I don't know what else to call it. So like in your work, okay. So like
wait, are you saying that streaming is not a job?
No, it's just I was implying that like I don't know because you mentioned that you have a background in software development, so I don't know if this is your job or not.
It is my job now.
Okay.
I'm just kidding with you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So in your work, you've had to become callous, and as a result of callous, you sometimes feel less empathy, right? And you have a couple of like abstract statements, and even when you talk about empathy, you use the word think a lot. Like it sounds like the manifestation of your empathy is something that I'd call cognitive empathy, which is it's sort of like an analysis of someone feeling bad as opposed to feeling bad yourself and like kind of like in essence capturing what they feel. Right? So
interesting.
And some of that actually relates to a term that is misunderstood, which is sociopathy. Right? So that's the inflammatory hypothesis. So what I want to explain myself.
Sounds bad.
It does sound bad. So I test very highly on the sociopathic scale, just as a disclaimer. And what that means, it doesn't mean like sociopathy isn't bad in and of itself. So psychiatrists tend to test very highly. And part of testing highly on the scale is actually controlling or not feeling emotional or like having a lot of control over the amount of emotional empathy you feel. So part of what makes psychiatrists good at their job is that they don't actually, when someone comes into my office and they feel super, super depressed, and I see people for like 10 hours a day who are all depressed, if I have a big valve in terms of like the faucet of empathy is open, I'm going to get destroyed. So
Hmm.
psychiatrists train themselves to actually like acquire some degree of like walls between them and another person. And those, when we think about the concept of sociopathy, I'm not calling you a sociopath because once again, I'm saying I test highly on this. I think that when you talk about feeling callous, that in
Yeah.
some way is similar to like how sociopaths feel, right? Because like
Interesting.
if we think about a sociopath and you ask them like, you know, if we think about them like how do like, you know, what kind of people are they? They're callous people.
Interesting. I will say, just for the sake of conversation, I was specifically talking about just the scammers
Yep.
because like I have kids and there's time the other day my youngest was really excited about something that was on the table, and one of the older ones, in a very evil way, I pushed pushed the youngest away, and I cried just because my I was remembering my childhood, and my little one's face was just devastated as to like why did this happen to me, and I cried because I was like, oh, like it was so many emotions, whatever.
What kind of
But
emotions did you have there?
oh gosh, uh, I think this is a terrible thing to not terrible. That's the wrong word, but I very much don't. I don't want my kids to get hurt. I don't want them to have to go up against. Like to me, what I saw in
What don't you want them
young,
to go up against?
yeah. So what I saw in the youngest of the Boga clan's eyes was just a complete, unexpected, you know, I don't want to use the word malevolent, but
Just use it.
just yeah, a malevolent act. Like why would my betrayal? Yeah, like why would my older uh, sibling do this to me? And I didn't like seeing that. I've been betrayed, and it's terrible. And even though it was a small thing, it was just one little.
What was a
Uh,
small thing?
well, it was just you could say it was just getting knocked over, right? Versus someone. It's not like your spouse cheats on you or something.
Yeah.
But for my young kid, that was probably maybe the first time or one of the first times that they've been betrayed. And yeah, so all those thoughts and flooded into my mind. But
Sure.
anyway,
And was
all
you,
that
you
was to say, I still think that I don't feel like I'm callous in most situations. Another way I could describe it is, um, and sorry, I talk a lot, so if you can just stop me. But when I first started streaming, and I still try to do this today, but sometimes at the end when I would talk to a scammer after I said, uh, gotcha. I I wasn't an old man after all. I'm just a normal guy wasting your time. I would ask them, why are you doing this? Do your parents know that you're doing this? I would try to have a heart to heart conversation.
beautiful.
And I really wanted to somehow reach in to their life, and even if it was a 1% chance that they might think about it at night, and it would get them to change, I would do that almost every time. And it made some people really upset because they wanted me to just yell at the scammers and say like F you, you know, you suck. But I really wanted to do it because I felt like there's mistakes I've made that people reached in and said, "Hey, you made a bad choice, but you can be better." Like why can't I do that to a scammer? Why can't we do that for people? That felt right. But over time, it's becoming harder and harder for me to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's another way to say I'm callous, or like it's harder to still have that same hope of
Yep.
like this guy can change or this girl can change because I've been doing it for 3 years, and you run across
How
so many
how
characters.
do they respond?
um Most of the time, there's probably three different responses. One is this arrogant, like, scamming is awesome. I make hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and I have like 16 what do they call it? I don't know. They're sleeping with girls all the time and their life is perfect. And they always bring up the money thing, like they make tons and tons of money, which I just think there's a lot of evidence to say that's not true. And
Sure.
But of course I think they want to feel special, and they want to take away anything I'm saying and just say, I love my life. Things are great. So that's probably a majority of the scammers.
But do they even
There was
engage with
another-
you on that level?
Yeah, I would probably half of them would, some of them would just hang up and say, we're not scammers. And they would just hang up, And the other half would respond to me. So I would say 50% just hang up. 25% would respond to me and say, I love my life. And then maybe 25% would get a little bit, you could tell that their voice changed a little bit, and they would tell you something like, well, this is the only thing that I can do to feed my family, or something like that. And then it was an even less percent of people that would just tell you, I'm a scammer. I don't make any money, but honestly, I'm not sure what else to do, and like get into a really, really actual real conversation. That's maybe like 2% or something.
And you say that your viewers don't like that?
Well, I think I think the community that I have now is fine when I do that. I think there's just especially when I first started and it was so new, there's a group of people that come in who and this is my perception of it. I talked a minute ago about how there's a nice feeling, right, of revenge or something.
Yeah.
When you get back at the scammers, whatever it is. And I think there's a lot of people who want to see that happen.
What?
And then when I start sympathizing or empathizing or whatever and saying, hey, you're a person, you can do better than this. What do you tell your kid? What do you tell your kids? Do you want your kids to have to do this? Is this the world that you want to create for them? People start thinking, wait a second, like, Kit, this guy doesn't deserve anything. He's a filthy scammer who needs to,
What do you take away from them, Kit, by humanizing the person you're talking to?
What do I take away from chat, or what do I take away from? I think for some people, I'm not saying the majority. I'm not saying the majority. I think there are some people that, maybe it's harder for them to hate that person, or harder for them to feel as though I don't know what the right word is. I haven't thought about this before.
Because you give them something very important, right? What is that feeling?
The revenge feeling, or I think that for some people, their family has been affected by scams.
Sure.
Maybe their grandma got scammed, and then here I am saying, this is just another person who could make better life choices and deserves a second chance. And I don't think you don't necessarily want to hear that when your mom just got scammed.
Yeah, and oddly enough, Kit, I don't have any data to support this, but I'd be surprised if most people who watch what you do resonate with you because they have been victims of some kind of scamming, or someone they know has been victimized. I think what you're talking about is a feeling of righteousness, right? It's like justice.
Yeah, there's people who
let them
uncomfortable
pay.
for me to accept this, but there are people who've said that. Yeah, like they've called it justice porn.
Yeah, absolutely.
The term for it. And it puts me in kind of a weird situation, or has put me in a weird situation at times, because while yes, I think that it's important to waste their time and educate people about these scammers, and And I don't ever want to say that it is acceptable for them to do what they're doing. I do genuinely believe that every person has value and that everyone should be treated that way. And
Sure.
I think that if most people thought about it, they would say, well, yeah, that's the way our justice system works, right? If you get in trouble, you're still treated as though you have some sort of, I mean, I could be wrong, but something that you might be able to bring to the world. So you have a defense against you and all these different things. But
Kit, a couple of things that if I can just jump in for a second. One is I want to explain a little bit more about what I meant and ask you a couple of questions about callousness and sociopathy, because I want to just clarify that I didn't mean to imply that I think you're a sociopath.
That's fine.
What I really meant to understand is I think that, so this is a big problem with the idea of sociopathy, is we kind of label people as sociopaths or not sociopaths. I don't think it's binary. Like I'll be a little bit more transparent. So when I was talking about psychiatrists, I think that callousness and essentially sociopathy is a function of the mind that can be grown and adaptive in certain circumstances, right? And to a certain degree, like all physicians have to learn how to deal with death and like deal with it in a very neutral way in order to do their job. And it doesn't surprise me at all, because I actually have the same experience that you have with your kids, which is years ago, I used to be very, very emotionally like level, and not many things would upset me or bother me. I could watch like movies and stuff with gore and all kinds of bad things happening to bad people, and it didn't bother me at all. In fact, I was probably even a little bit like titillated or the extremity, like watching an extreme emotion or extreme situation made me feel a little bit more, because most of my experience of life was like just me being dead on the inside.
Yeah.
And but after having kids, and also I think after sort of starting to practice psychiatry, I found that I had more walls up for my emotions with people, and then there was some amount of like emotional buildup that would happen with people, which then would start pouring out in other situations, and especially like with my kids and stuff. So like I find myself getting teary-eyed and stuff at all kinds of random times. And so I think it is, I'm kind of curious about sort of talking a little bit more with you about, being closed off and callous in one situation and being open and feeling in another situation. I'd also be a little bit curious. You said that, you said something about being betrayed, and when you saw, like one child, it's not so much that your kid was malevolent, although like there was some malevolence in there, right?
So they're still pretty young.
Yeah,
so it's like,
sure.
But I don't know if they intentionally tried to, like, there's a very big difference.
Sure,
right?
Absolutely. So, but there was something about that picture that feels malevolent, even if it's not, one of your kids being malevolent. Maybe the other kid doesn't have a perception of malevolence, but there's malevolence somewhere in there, right? Maybe between the lines. And so you said it reminded you of something that happened to you. I'm very curious about that. And part of the reason that I'm curious about that is I'm curious why you do what you do.
I don't think I do what I do because of the probably biggest betrayal thing that comes to mind. So it would probably be two very different things, but I'm happy to talk about either or both. So.
And then the last kind of thing that I want to talk to you about is, do you think your job is fun?
Yeah, for the most part.
What's fun about it?
Very much enjoy it. I like that every day is a different like story or a different. I don't know what to expect every day, and
so novelty.
Yeah, I think occasionally some people, and I totally understand this. For some people, once you've seen a couple of my streams and you've seen that there's probably 5 or 6 different main scams, let's say, and after you've seen, let's say, I'll say a dozen, whatever it is, you could go, all right, well, I kind of know what's going to happen now. Like I have a general understanding of the way the scams work, and I think some people are like, oh, he just does the same thing every day. But for me, it's always a different person I'm talking to on the phone.
Sure.
I try to play a different character. we do a lot of weird, different things, and I like that. I also really like I like making people laugh, and
Absolutely.
I think that to some degree there's been a sense of I don't know if I want to say purpose, but it
Absolutely.
feels like I'm providing for my family. I'm doing something that I enjoy and believe in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm educating people. I'm able to help people laugh and learn about things, and I feel like it meets a lot of that checks a lot of things off the list. So I'm
Absolutely,
very
man.
grateful for that. Very grateful for
I'm
that.
curious, do you
And
feel like a predator?
no, I I don't think so. You mean I talking to the scammers?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
People have asked me before, like, yeah, do I feel like I don't know, taking advantage? Some people have said that I am taking advantage of them, and like
I don't know that you're taking advantage of them.
I don't think so. Do I feel like a predator? I don't know if anyone's asked me that particular question.
Yeah.
Predator, as in, it makes me think of
So,
like a lion or something. Like I'm stalking them and
yeah,
trying to.
so I wasn't thinking so much lion, I was thinking spider.
Okay, like trying to trap them and yeah. Um, chat says confirmed sociopathic predator.
No, I really don't think you're a sociopath.
um,
And this is what I
no,
mean by challenging. Is this okay that I'm asking you these things?
oh, I don't care.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is interesting. I really like to think. I really like to think about stuff. So, um, yeah, I don't think that I have ever thought of myself as a predator or like I
Sure.
was doing something wrong. I did have some serious conversations with a friend of mine who's also just likes to think in the very beginning, so 3 years ago, let's say, is what, is what I'm doing wrong, let's say. Like that was sort of the topic. What am I, am I, so you would, if we're straightforward about it, I lie on the phone every day. Right? I talk to a scammer and I pretend to be an 87-year-old man or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. And for 5 hours or whatever, I lie. And at first, there were times where I would think, oh gosh, I mean, a pretty big. I think it's fairly important to. Fairly important is wrong. I don't want to. I think it's very important not to lie. I think something that I teach my kids and that everyone generally would say to their children. You don't tell your kid, you know what a great thing to do, son or daughter? Like lie.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. So that was something that was hard for me for a while. Like, gosh, I'm lying every day. And the way I sort of justified it, or the way that I thought through it with one of my friends, was that one, I do typically tell them at the end. I do, not always, but in the beginning, I always at the end told them that I was actually me, and I sort of like stopped lying, and
Sure.
explained the whole entire situation. And part of that was a mental thing for me to say, okay, well, I'm not lying anymore. Like
Mm-hmm.
they know. But then I also, when in talking to my friend, thought, well, maybe this is just. I think there's a word for it, so you might know. Sort of like it. I don't want to say for the greater good because I think that's like misquoted a lot. But
What?
that
Why don't
that
you want
kind
to
of
use
vibe.
that?
But maybe that's the best. Oh, I meant to say the ends justify the means. I
Yep.
think that's misquoted a lot. But for the greater good, you could kind of say, yeah, like, okay, so I lied to a scammer for a while so I could keep them on the phone and educate thousands of people about the scam. I feel like there's a
So what?
that the
I'm gonna ask you
yeah,
something, okay?
sorry.
So what it sounds like? No, no. I'm just. I actually really appreciate that you talk a lot. You share a lot of thoughts, and it really,
Okay.
honestly, it's really awesome. So let me ask you something. So right now, what you're doing is essentially providing a lot of reasons why your behavior is good, right?
Yeah, because you
What's
asked me, am I
justified?
a predator? So I was
I
trying
asked you
to
if you
say,
feel like a predator.
okay. So I was trying to say, yeah, I don't think I am, and here's why. But maybe,
Absolutely, right?
yeah.
So I didn't. Okay, so maybe to clarify, so I'll ask you again. Do you feel like a
Just
predator
so
when
you're,
you're doing this?
but just so it's clear, I didn't think that you were calling me a predator. Sorry if
Okay,
I misspoke.
we'll get there
Um,
at some point. We'll get there eventually.
um, no, I don't think that I'm a predator. I don't feel like I'm a predator. I
Okay.
don't
When you're
think
talking
any
to a
of those
scammer, do
thoughts.
you feel like you're hunting?
Hmm. I've been hunting before, so, uh, gosh, you know, maybe there's definitely times where I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but there's definitely times where it feels like I'm a few steps ahead of them, and I know
Abs-
exactly what they're gonna do, and
Yep.
I'm laying my traps, if you will, or like
Yep.
there's days where it feels like what's the term? I can play them like a fiddle,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like I hate maybe this comes across really weird, but yeah, it's like I can do whatever I want. I can have them sing songs. I can have them.
Yeah.
You could.
So,
You can really just.
so you're a
You're in
person
control now. Yeah.
who can control other people. You can play them like a fiddle.
Well, I've only experienced that with the scammers, but
Absolutely. Right?
yeah.
But I mean, these are your words, right? There are moments where you can feel like you can play them like a fiddle. And we're talking about
Yeah. So I would say the concept is, or at least as I've read about it or thought
before
about it.
you
Go ahead.
jump in,
Yeah.
I want to ask you, what are you feeling when I say that? It's like kind of an inflammatory and almost like an attack
I
kind of
feel
statement.
uncomfortable. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
what
feel
do you
like I
feel? Let's
shouldn't
talk
be
about
saying
that.
that. I feel like I shouldn't be saying it because
I disagree, by the way, but let's talk about
oh,
that for
okay.
a second. Why
It
do you
just
feel
feels
uncomfortable?
maybe it feels wrong. It feels like a bad like oh yeah, I can control people. Like it feels
Sure.
like a bad guy in a movie would be saying
Yep. Yeah.
I can control people.
So,
But
Kit, who else can control people?
uh there's a lot of jokes that I want to say, but
Me,
no, who
right?
okay.
So I can do that. So a lot of times, on stream, I'm capable of bringing people in a particular way, and I choose to use my power for good instead of evil. But like
Yeah.
I can. I mean, so I have a skill to essentially like shape the behavior and perceptions of other human beings. That's what a
Well,
psychiatrist does.
yeah, and I think the more you, especially the more you you know how people think, and the more that you experience it, I'm sure you can ask questions and lead people any which way. And I think I've experienced that with the scammers because I know for the most part, let's say 90%, I know what they want. I know how the scam works. I know what's driving them. I've learned all of these things. And so you can use it, you could say against them to waste their time and
Absolutely,
do
right?
whatever it is you want. And so I would say the same thing. I've used it in a way, I've used it for good rather than to
Absolutely. So
for
let's be
bad.
clear
But
about this, okay? So I'm glad that you're saying that because I understand that you feel uncomfortable because I think what you're doing. So I'm just going to ask you, is it fun? And your answers were there's novelty, there's humor, there's purpose. I support my family. Those are all positive things, right? And so
but is it
so when I ask you, is it fun? Your answers involved like, yeah, it's something new every day. I support my family. It's funny. There's like humor to it. And I think there's also like this undercurrent of like I think why people watch is because they're watching a hunter, right? Like I think that just because you're trying to like I think it's very I think your moral approach is doubly important because there's an underbelly to this that is not positive. So I think that you're a good person because you don't give in to those feelings of righteousness and you try to go the extra step and actually help people. But I think there's absolutely some amount of, satisfaction from playing people like a fiddle, because that's how human beings work. Right? The other thing, if we think about it, the more I'm asking you about this stuff and the more uncomfortable I make you feel, the more, and apologies for doing this, but I'm kind of doing it on purpose. I'm sort of manipulating you even now, right?
Jerk.
So I'm like, as the discomfort comes up, you say more and more positive things. Like you're like, I'm trying to help people. And I think that's how you've reconciled your own internal conflict, because I think there's a part of you that is like darkness on the inside, right? Because we all have that.
Sure. Yeah. And
then,
I think there's been plenty of times where you think to yourself, like, gosh, am I, like, is this, well, not as much more, but when I first started, like, is this ethical? Like, am I doing something wrong here?
Yeah.
It seems like it's good, but I had to work through that quite a bit.
Because I think there's so that what I think is really respectable about what you do, and I think what makes you a good person is that struggle. So like I want to kind of try to be transparent.
Thanks, I guess.
Yeah. So I think we have the perception that good people don't have bad pieces, right? When I ask you, is this fun? You're like, yeah, I do it because I'm trying to help people. I'm trying to like educate people about scamming. This is good about what I do. This is good about what I do. This is good about what about it. This is good at what. Yeah.
I think part of that is because there are things that are not fun. So I think I was starting to say, well, here's the reasons why it.
What isn't fun?
Here's the times where I feel like it's fun.
Sure.
But there's other times where it's not fun. And I also think in general, there's probably some fun, whether it's a dark way or whatever you want to call it, when you're in control of of the situation, and you can get them to sing Britney Spears or whatever it is. That's
How does that feel
fun,
to do that?
Yeah. Good. I don't know. I suppose it's because I still think it's because there's value in it. Like I see it as I'm keeping them on the phone.
Why can't you?
But
why do you have to see value in it? Right?
Because otherwise it just feels like I'm manipulating a human being, and that doesn't feel right.
Yeah, but do you see what your mind is doing? There's the feeling of manipulating a human being, and then the rationalization comes in and says, let's balance it. Let's balance it. That's what you're always telling me. Like, here's the way I balance it. Here's the way I balance it. Here's the way I balance it.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, that makes you feel like an evil person, but that's actually what makes you a good person. Because a good person is not someone who lacks negative feelings. A good person is one who strives to balance, like, that sense of, like, because you're a fucking predator, man. Right? Like, that's what you do.
To some degree, yeah. I lie and manipulate evil people, but yeah.
You're absolutely a predator for evil people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like let's be clear. Like, you lure people into your trap, and then you pounce, which is what people are looking for. They're looking for you to pounce. And then what you do, fucking Kit, then you be nice to them and you try to help them. And then it's like, and then everyone who's watching, like, sees this, like, snow leopard jump out of a tree and, like, grab a monkey, and then starts giving it, like, an oil massage. And they're like, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah, why isn't he tearing their limbs apart and feeding it to his children? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. That's a good description. I mean, there certainly have been times where, especially when I come up against someone who just feels completely... I think there's been a few times specifically that I have met maybe a sociopath, which I believe is someone who lacks empathy.
Sure.
If that's the one way of describing it.
Yeah.
Or there have been people who just do not care at all about any person's feeling whatsoever. And that has been weird and uncomfortable to come up against. And so with those people, there have been times where I'm thinking, I don't know if I can have a serious conversation with this person and tell them what they're doing is wrong. You need to stop. And so I'll pounce and set the trap, or whatever you want to call it, or I'll just end the call and I'll leave them thinking, gosh, I ruined it. I could have scammed this person. And I'll just end it because I'm
Interesting.
thinking I would rather. So here's another on that line of thought. There have been times where I've revealed to them. I call it revealing, like
Yeah.
taking my mask off. Let's
Which,
say
by the way, like,
taking.
can we just for a minute comment on the fact that you actually you wear you literally become a Batman, right? Like your identity is secret. You wear something and then you go out for the greater good, and it's the world that makes you put the mask on, right? Like the world calls you to do this because
Sorry,
people are being
I can
scammed. Yeah,
take my mask.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's really humbling. I don't know how to take compliments very well because I just feel like a normal guy. But yeah, I appreciate that, and I
That's
think
what
that.
makes you so extraordinary.
Well, thanks. Anyway, what were we talking about? Oh, so there's times where I do appreciate that. I don't want that to come across whatever. It's just hard for me to.
Why is it
I
hard
don't
for
know.
you to take
That's a whole other
compliments?
topic, I suppose. That's a whole other. Um, because I think the simplest answer is I think that I'm just an average person who I think I'm a maybe at the root of it is like what I was saying before. I think everyone has value. Everyone has things that they can do that are good
How did you
and
learn
great.
that?
And how did I learn what the value thing or
Yeah, how did you so it seems like you really do have a central belief that I don't even know if you I think you convinced yourself of that, right? Like that's a conclusion that you
probably
and you
yeah.
kind of worked to that, and at some point you almost chose to set that
Yeah.
as north on your compass.
Yeah, I think there's times where you look at this is all I haven't answered a lot of these questions before. It's kind of fun to think about, but I think to some degree when you look at I come across some evil people and you could say the world is terrible. Why should I have kids? Why should anybody do anything? Why would gosh, it's just this terrible evil place full of heartache and misery or whatever. Like you could have those thoughts, or you could say I guess there was a moment where I said no. I just refused to believe that had to be acceptable. And I said if there are people who can be evil, there has to be, and I'm not trying to say anything special about myself. I just think everyone makes a choice every single day and says, am I going to do something that's a little bit good or a little bit bad? And it feels like why can't we choose to do better? Why can't we be good? And I want that for my kids and my family, and I want
So
there to be good.
let me ask you
So
something. Why
anyway,
was it so emotional for you when one of your kids knocked off the thing for the other kid?
probably because they saw bad or they
What does that mean?
evil. Um, I think it was a silly moment to some degree because,
I don't think it was silly at all.
but well, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. To me, it was one of the first times where I watched the whole thing take place, where I saw something bad or malevolent or whatever it was. I mean, they're young, so it was one of the first times that they just saw evil, and there was this look on their face of I don't understand why this happened. And
I wonder
yeah,
if the reason it struck you is because in that moment you saw your younger child start to formulate a world where this struggle that you talk about was not true. And what I'm sorry, this is going to be really abstract, but so this is what I'm hearing from you. You kind of talk about people making a choice, right? You're saying that all human beings have value. And that sort of presupposes and that every day you have a struggle and you have to make a choice to be a good person or a bad person. And so that I think is absolutely what I've been trying to point out to you about your own psychological process is that it's lopsided towards positivity because I think you know that there's a negative person inside you, right? There's the hunter.
I think that
and the
100%
righteous.
I could do terrible, evil things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is
100%.
because you recognize that beast is within you. That's why you recognize that people have value. So, like, it's not that people have inherent value. It's that they have the hope for value, right? That any person can be turned around. Because if it is hopeless for others, then what does that mean for your own internal beast? Do you think that there is a reason why certain people get concerned with certain philosophical questions? Like, all of your abstractness has to do with, like, this axis of good and evil, of, like, value and forgiveness. And can someone be bad, and can we forgive them, or should they be, should we crucify them and just, like, is there forgiveness, or is there, like, righteous justice about putting them in their place? and my sense is that all of your abstractions and now, like, so I form conclusions that are really, really unfair because it's like a snap judgment, right? So the reason this isn't really a conclusion, it's really like a hypothesis for you to think about. Is it okay if I share like my hypothesis about a couple of things and just a couple of observations?
Say whatever. I might disagree.
So yeah, absolutely. You're completely and you're going to be the judge of whether this is right or wrong. It's not my place to make a conclusion. Like, you're the one who knows, right? So I'm going to share this with you, and then I'd love to hear your reflections about, like, whether I'm way off base or it resonates. So the first is, like, I think you are a good person. I don't think you're a sociopath, but I think that you do have this part of you that like we all have. And this is the problem, is, like, people don't get this, and this is why I'm harping on this, is because people feel like bad people because they have bad feelings. And by bad feelings, I don't mean anger and depression. I mean, like, you know what Schadenfreude means? Mm-mm. So Schadenfreude is a German word that involves getting pleasure out of the suffering of others.
Mm. Ich spreche ein bisschen Deutsch.
Okay.
Oh, I said I speak a little German.
So I think it's interesting because like human beings have that, right? Like, when we watch about, like, if you look at, like, some subreddits, right? Like, there's a lot of satisfaction over, like, watching the idiocy of others. And I don't know how that is, but I think it's wired into us because human beings that's like it's not like a cultural thing. It's like you can take human beings from all over the world and they're going to get satisfaction out of watching someone else, like, fuck up in some way. And then I think we also have parts of us that are, some of us are hunters, right? And I think that, like, just because you feel that degree of satisfaction, I think it's part of the reason that people watch what you do, because there's a certain, like, righteous satisfaction out of being able to, like, demolish someone who's, like, an evil person. And so we have these parts of us that we generally view as, like, dark or negative, right? Like the capacity to hunt, the capacity to, like, take advantage of someone, the capacity to manipulate someone. And goodness or badness doesn't come from having those thoughts. So, like, for example, people with OCD, sometimes people have obsessional thoughts that are negative.
Yeah.
They, like, walk around and, like, they have OCD, which means their mind, like, thinks about killing other people. And then this person feels bad because they're like, I don't want to have these thoughts, but our mind we don't control what our mind thinks of, right? Like, that's
sure.
But sure. we blame ourselves for the thoughts that our mind gives us. And for someone who has anxiety, they're like, I want to just be able to interact with normal human beings at a party. But instead my mind is like, oh, you're a dumbass. Shut up.
Right.
You look like an idiot. No one here likes you. Like, that doesn't mean we're actually bad people. Thinking negative thoughts doesn't make us bad people. Doesn't make it true. Our thoughts are not true. And what I think is actually...
I think that I would agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. So what I think where goodness comes from is not about what your internal impulses are, but about the way that you act and form them. Like, the way that you act on them in the life that you form for yourself. Right? So
I think that's part of the thought of, okay, why I said, well, you have a choice every day. Like, you have...
So this is where...
thoughts...
Exactly. So I think your worldview comes from this struggle that you have within yourself. Right? Because let me ask you something, Kit. Yeah. If you became a scammer, how successful do you think you would be?
I choose not to answer that question.
Absolutely.
No, just kidding.
I don't need an
I
answer.
feel like with everything that I have learned that I could be very successful.
I think
Sure.
you'd be very good at it. And I
I
think,
think that I don't think that I could ever actually do it though. I feel like I would it would be it would throw away all of my morality and everything that I hold
absolutely. So
like
when you
dear.
say
But
I
just to answer
couldn't
your question,
I couldn't
yeah, I think
actually
that
do
I would be
it.
a very good skill.
Let's be clear about definitions. You're capable of doing it. You choose
Sure.
not to. And that's where goodness
Yeah.
comes from,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, that's it's very interesting. I think that that's I think that I would agree with what you're saying. That, and that's why I say that idea of now the where we get value from and all that stuff. I still don't
So
fully understand.
beautiful.
I just
You
think
took the next
thought
point
is
right
like,
out of my mouth.
I think if I can try to summarize it is, well, every day you can choose to do something that is going to make things worse and bad and evil for you or those around you, or you can choose to do things that are good for you and your family and those around you, and that brings value maybe.
Yeah, so I would
And so
change it.
maybe
I
that's
mean,
why that might be sort of my weird thought
yeah,
about it
so
all.
so now I think we get to maybe what we talk about next time, which is where does this come from, right? And I think that like in your case, I'd be really really curious about, what your upbringing was like, who took advantage of you, and whether on some level you're trying, because from a Freudian level, what we kind of say is like some people have daddy issues, like, right? So what we mean by that is like oftentimes, or some women especially will have a particular relationship of where their father like didn't treat them with respect, and then that translates in some way into their like current romantic relationships. The point here is that something about your upbringing in the past shapes the way that you live your life today. And that's kind of like a psychological Freudian, like kind of a negative cast to it. I think that's the same side, that's a different side of the coin, but is essentially the same coin as what Mahatma Gandhi said, which is be the change that you want to see in the world.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that statement.